Is this thing on? Okay, is it? Alright then, my name is Stefano Gualeni, and during the day I'm a researcher and a lecturer at NHTV University of Applied Sciences. During the night, I try to do philosophy with game design, or game design with philosophy, or both, occasionally neither. This is me, or to be more accurate, this is a picture of me. In the past years, and with the help of my multi-talented friend and unicorn, Marcello Gómez Maureira, which you see here, we developed a few games with a philosophical theme. In 2009, we worked on Harvest, a free first-person action-adventure video game which materialized some of the questions raised in the famed essay What It Is Like to Be a Bat by Thomas Nagel. Together we worked on Gualeni, or The Horrendous Parade, which was a commercial title that was inspired by the notion of complex ideas as brought forward by David Hume in 1748. The game is available for iPhone and iPad. In the last months, while working on something even less savory, we have decided to spend time on an experimental title called Necessary Evil, a free critical game developed in Unity with the help of the skillful programming of independent game development veteran Dino Dini. This is a picture of him. Yeah. This video is meant as a surrogate of my presence at the 2013 Digital Games Research Association conference in Atlanta. It is also supposed to inform you about this less philosophical project of ours, Necessary Evil, and how Necessary Evil can be understood as a critical game. The first thing that I believe is essential to mention is that in a critical game, gameplay is not autotelic, is not end to itself. In the case of critical games, in fact, gameplay is chiefly used instrumentally. That is to say, for an objective which is normally not the goal of a piece of entertainment software. So, well, we took up Unity and made a critical game. As mentioned before, the title of our game is Necessary Evil, and it is free to play at the web address you can read in this slide. How is Necessary Evil a critical game, you might wonder? What does it criticize, and how does it do it? Well, to begin with, I think it's important to mention that the initial train of thought that motivated our critical game was roughly the following. In many video games, the player impersonates a sort of heroic figure, an indefatigable explorer, slayer of monsters, vanquisher of evil. Well, I explored and killed and got lost and dove deeper into those mazes and found monsters locked in the tiniest of rooms in the deepest of dungeons, and I asked myself, what are those things supposed to leave off? Who put them there? Where do they go to the toilet even? How do they spend the centuries? How does the world appear to their eyes? Were they born in that secret cellar, or did they just spend the last few years there? And for which purpose? The lives of these monsters, as I imagined them, swung from centuries of mind-deteriorating, aggravating captivity to sudden bursts of violence when heroes would come into the dungeons to slay them. In other words, I imagined that their world would look to them as something very dire, limiting, meaningless, and probably confusing. This is particularly true for them, in my opinion, for the simple reason that the worlds that they inhabit were not literally built for them to enjoy or to make sense of them. These worlds were in fact built for players to experience, and only take the perspective of the latter into account both from a technical and an ontological point of view. In more academic terms, the interactive worlds of video games only materialize an idealistic perspective on reality. For players, Video games are idealism as working products. According to a radical version of idealism, the qualities that we can encounter in objects, regardless of their actual or digitally mediated nature, are not objective properties that they possess in themselves. In simpler words, it is our experience of such objects, for example in George Berkeley's subjective perspective, that is responsible for bringing them and their properties into existence as mental contents. As mentioned a few slides ago, from a game design standpoint, video games and their worlds are customarily shaped with a certain player experience in mind. Following a similar approach, from the perspective of software architecture, video game worlds are literally materialized around the player's possibility to perceive them or interact with them. Objects in the world that are too far from the players, whose sight is occluded by other objects, or they are momentarily irrelevant for gameplay, literally do not exist as far as the game states are concerned. A very clear example of how such perspective translates into the technicalities of game development can be seen, for example, in the techniques of hidden surfaces removal or occlusion culling. In these techniques, parts of the world that the player does not perceive do not actually exist geometrically. The idea of the fragmentation of game worlds into levels follows the same logics. Only one of those levels can be current at any given time, while all the others are merely potential and unexpressed by the game state. The digital version of an idealistic mindset has the evident functional scope of limiting the amount of calculations that are needed to suitably materialize the game worlds within a computer. Technically speaking, this aspect of the way in which we develop video games is a desirable, if not necessary, evil. I believe that the same approach that characterizes this way of making video games can also be recognized in the argument that was in vogue a few months ago, according to which a game is not a game until someone plays it. Necessary Evil, our critical game, problematizes the idealistic structuring of video game worlds and ridicules the player-centrism of video games. Game design-wise, this is pursued by having the player control a secondary character, a contributory and generic evil minion. Following established conventions of the games industry, the said evil minion will be a character playing a secondary, marginal role in the process of another character, the hero. Habitually, the hero is the playing character around whom the video game world and its narrative revolve around. In Necessary Evil, the hero will be a non-playing character. Conversely, the player will control an evil minion. This was decided with the purpose of making the player feel disposable, misplaced, without a specific identity, past, future, or any hope. The game environment is not built around the monster. When controlling the monster, in fact, the player cannot break crates or open doors. When he tried to pry open the only chest in the room, the chest would simply squeak open, revealing nothing. In a similar fashion, the interface on screen does not upgrade or register anything about the status of the monster. As for the rest of the world, it was built for somebody else. In the game, we purposefully wanted the player to feel confused. The play experience would be that of a technically brutal awakening in the room with no smoothness, no guidance, and no explanation. As mentioned before, the room itself would offer interaction, but it will be interaction which accomplishes nothing or close to nothing. We wanted the player not only to feel confused and trapped, but hopefully also bored to an extent. This world, he might think, is not interesting to me, is not entertaining for me. This world is not for me. A few extra touches, mostly of an aesthetical nature, were put in place so that the message of the game would be even stronger. I'm talking here about the carpet, that is actually the path that the hero is supposed to take. Not to add spoiler to spoiler, Let me just add that the game features 2 game over conditions, or prescribed endings, or whatever other way your framework of reference labels an endgame state. In the first one, the hero slays the monster, and finally leaves the room, which, upon his departure, gets technically disassembled and removed from the memory of the computer. The second finale involves the monster actually winning the inevitable fight with the hero. I'll leave it to you to find out what happens then. In summary, with Necessary Evil, we tried to give a developer's perspective on critical games. We tried to disclose in a humorous and approachable way 2 ideas in particular. The first one is that the language of the videoludic medium is suitable and relatively easy to be used for self-reflection. The second one is that an idealistic perspective on game development, world building or level design is only one approach. Well, I hope this video provided enough information of how we did this critical game and what kind of game design decisions were involved. Also, we hope that this video got you inspired and perhaps curious about playing our game. We will continue to do philosophical games, and you can follow what we do on Twitter. These are our accounts, and well, until next time.